Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis hadn't spoken in 2 decades, but when Dean surprised Jerry on live television, the words he whispered made both men cry like children in front of 50 million viewers. It was September 5, 1976, during Jerry Lewis's annual Labor Day telethon for muscular dystrophy. Jerry was deep into hour 14 of his marathon broadcast, exhausted but determined to raise money for his kids, the children suffering from muscular dystrophy, who had become his life's mission. What Jerry didn't know was that 3,000 miles away in Las Vegas, his former comedy partner and best friend turned bitter enemy was watching every moment on television. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis had been the biggest comedy duo in the world during the 1950s. Martin and Lewis were everywhere. Movies, television, nightclubs, radio. They were making millions of dollars and seemed inseparable. But on July 25, 1956, their partnership exploded in the most devastating way possible. The breakup wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. These two men had been like brothers, sharing everything from hotel rooms to family dinners to their deepest secrets. When it ended with such bitterness that they hadn't spoken a single word to each other in 20 years. Jerry had tried reaching out several times over the years. He'd sent letters that went unanswered. He'd called Dean's house, only to be told that Dean wasn't available. He'd even shown up at Dean's performances, hoping for a chance encounter that never materialized. Dean, for his part, seemed to have erased Jerry from his existence completely. When reporters asked about Jerry, Dean would simply say, "Who?" When Jerry's name came up in conversations, Dean would change the subject or walk away. The entertainment industry had chosen sides. Some supported Dean's position, others felt Jerry had been wronged. But everyone agreed on one thing: this was the most bitter and permanent breakup in show business history. By 1976, Jerry's telethon had become his defining achievement. What had started as a simple fundraiser had grown into a national institution. Every Labor Day weekend, Jerry would broadcast live for 21 hours straight, entertaining viewers while raising millions of dollars for muscular dystrophy research. Jerry took the telethon more seriously than anything else in his life. It wasn't about his career or his ego. It was about saving children's lives. He would perform through exhaustion, through illness, through personal crises. Nothing stopped Jerry Lewis when it came to his telethon. That September night, Jerry was in his element, despite his exhaustion. He was singing, dancing, telling jokes, and making heartfelt pleas for donations. The phone banks were busy, the money was pouring in, and Jerry was running on pure adrenaline and determination. At around 8:30 p.m. Pacific time, Jerry was in the middle of introducing a musical guest when something happened that no one expected. Frank Sinatra walked onto the stage. The audience erupted in applause. Frank's appearance wasn't completely shocking. Celebrities often showed up to support Jerry's cause, but Frank looked nervous, almost hesitant, which was completely unlike him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank announced, "I have a surprise guest tonight, someone who wanted to be here to support Jerry's kids." Jerry's face lit up with curiosity and genuine warmth. He loved surprises during the telethon, especially when they involved his friends, showing their support for the cause. "Well, bring them out, Frank," Jerry said, his voice carrying the enthusiasm that had sustained him through 14 hours of broadcasting. Frank turned toward the wings and nodded. "Come on out here." From behind the stage curtain stepped Dean Martin. Jerry Lewis froze completely. The smile disappeared from his face, replaced by an expression of absolute shock. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he was seeing. Dean Martin, looking nervous but determined, walked slowly toward the center of the stage where Jerry stood. The audience, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary, fell completely silent. The two men stood facing each other for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 seconds. 20 years of hurt, anger, and regret hung in the air between them. Jerry's eyes filled with tears immediately. Not the performative tears of a telethon host, but real deep emotional tears of a man seeing his lost brother after 2 decades of silence. Dean looked directly into Jerry's eyes and opened his arms. Jerry collapsed into Dean's embrace like a child running to his father. Both men were crying now, holding each other with an intensity that spoke of 20 years of buried love and pain. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or remain silent. This clearly wasn't entertainment. This was real life, real emotion, real healing, happening in front of millions of people. When they finally separated, both men were openly weeping. Jerry tried to speak but couldn't form words. Dean, always the cooler of the two, managed to compose himself enough to lean close to Jerry's ear. What Dean whispered to Jerry in that moment would remain between them for the rest of their lives, but Jerry's reaction told the story. His entire body shook with sobs, and he grabbed Dean again, holding him even tighter than before. Later, Jerry would only say that Dean's words explained everything and forgave everything, all at once. Standing there on the telethon stage, with cameras rolling and 50 million people watching, Jerry Lewis looked into Dean Martin's eyes and said, "I love you. I've missed you so much." Dean's response was simple and perfect. "I love you too, partner. I've missed you too." The word partner hit Jerry like a physical blow. That's what they had called each other during their glory years. Not Dean and Jerry, but partners. It was a word loaded with history, affection, and shared dreams. Frank Sinatra, who had been watching from the side of the stage, was crying too. Later, Frank would admit that he had orchestrated this reunion, convincing Dean that 20 years was long enough to hold a grudge. The reunion lasted only about 3 minutes on screen, but it changed everything. Dean stayed for the rest of the telethon, sitting quietly in the background while Jerry continued his hosting duties. Occasionally, the cameras would catch them looking at each other and smiling, not the performative smiles of entertainers, but the genuine smiles of friends who had found each other again. When the telethon ended early Monday morning, Dean and Jerry spent 2 hours alone in Jerry's dressing room, talking about everything that had happened, everything they had lost, and everything they hoped to rebuild. The media went crazy over the reunion. Every newspaper and magazine in the country covered the story. "Martin and Lewis reunite," screamed headlines across America. Entertainment reporters called it the most emotional moment in television history. But for Jerry and Dean, the media attention was secondary. What mattered was that they had found their way back to each other. The reunion led to a renewed friendship that lasted until Dean's death in 1995. They never worked together professionally again. Too much time had passed, and they were different people now. But they spoke regularly, spent holidays together, and supported each other through personal crises. Jerry was one of the first people Dean called when his son Dean Paul died in the plane crash. Dean was there for Jerry during his battles with addiction and health problems. They had reclaimed their brotherhood, and they protected it fiercely. Years later, Jerry would often talk about that September night and what it meant to him. "Dean gave me my life back," he would say. "I didn't realize how much of myself I had lost when we stopped being friends. When he walked onto that stage, he wasn't just ending our fight, he was saving my soul." Dean, being more private about emotional matters, rarely discussed the reunion publicly. But those close to him said it changed him profoundly. "Dean carried guilt about that breakup for 20 years, said Charlie Hodge, Dean's close friend. When he finally made peace with Jerry, it was like a weight was lifted off his shoulders. The telethon reunion became the stuff of legend. Clips of Dean and Jerry's emotional embrace became some of the most replayed moments in television history. It proved that some bonds are stronger than pride, stronger than hurt, stronger than time itself. What made the moment even more powerful was that it happened during Jerry's telethon, an event dedicated to helping children with muscular dystrophy. In a way, Jerry's devotion to helping others had created the space for this healing to occur. Frank Sinatra later revealed that he had been planning the reunion for months. He had worked on Dean for weeks, convincing him that life was too short for permanent grudges. "I told Dean that Jerry was killing himself on that telethon every year, trying to save kids' lives," Frank said. "I asked him if 20 years of anger was worth more than one night of healing. The answer, as the world witnessed, was no." When Dean Martin died on Christmas Day 1995, Jerry Lewis was devastated, but he was also grateful. "At least we had 19 years after that night," Jerry said. 19 years of friendship that we almost lost forever." The reunion on Jerry's telethon became a symbol of the power of forgiveness and the importance of not letting pride destroy love. Two men who had once been closer than brothers had found their way back to each other, proving that it's never too late to heal old wounds. The whispered words that Dean Martin spoke to Jerry Lewis that night remain a secret, but their impact was visible to the entire world. Two men crying like children, holding each other like they'd never let go, showing 50 million viewers what real forgiveness looks like. If this story of friendship, forgiveness, and second chances moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of letting go of old hurts. Have you ever had a friendship that was worth swallowing your pride to save? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to check out our other videos about the healing power of human connection.